I mean, what do I want to tell planners? It's just look at the world. Only 15% of the world actually owns a car. 85% of the world does not depend on a personal vehicle.
Welcome to the Green Urbanist, podcast for urbanists fighting climate change. I'm Ross. Hello, welcome back to another episode. Ross here. Today we're talking about the intersection of mobility, sustainability, social justice, and disability rights. I'm joined today by Anna, Micah and Abby from Disability Rights Washington, who are part of the Disability Mobility Initiative for Washington State in the US. They're doing amazing work in sharing the stories of how people with disabilities move around and are campaigning for systemic change in how our urban environments are designed and built. They want to see people with disabilities in real positions of power and influencing decision making, and they talk about the systemic barriers that are currently stopping this. Micah and Abby are both legally blind, and Anna has limited sight, which means they're non-drivers in a world built for cars. They share their stories, explaining how this affects their lives and the lives of other people who are non-drivers in ways that able-bodied planners and policymakers don't appreciate. What's fascinating about this discussion is that it's so wide-ranging and multifaceted. Car domination is not only a huge source of carbon emissions, but it also excludes particular groups in society from entering the workforce, from accessing education and maintaining social ties. This conversation really brought home for me the fact that continuing to build car-dependent suburbs and underfunding public transport as we have been is not only unsustainable and unhealthy for us, but it's also unethical in a way because it excludes many members of society from reaching their potential and living fulfilling lives. And this includes children, the elderly, and anyone else who, for whatever reason, does not have access to a car or to drive. If you want to learn more about their work, go to disabilityrightswa.org. There is a link in the episode description. They're also on Twitter and TikTok. In particular, take a look at their Story Map project, where they have gathered interviews with non-drivers explaining how they get around their local areas. This is a really useful resource, even for someone like me on the other side of the world. I know there are similar barriers in the UK and Europe. For now, enjoy my conversation with Abby, Micah and Anna. Thank you all for joining me on the Green Urbanist podcast. I'm really excited to have you here and for the conversation we're going to have. Let's just start. Be great if you could all introduce yourself, tell me who you are and what you do. And I'll start with you, Anna, please.
Hello, Anna here, Anna Zivarts. I'm the director of the Disability Mobility Initiative, and we are a program that's an organizing and advocacy program hosted by Disability Rights Washington in Washington State. And we are organizing non-drivers from throughout our state to have a bigger voice in transportation, planning, and policy decisions, and so that we can have access to our communities, and so that our communities can be more healthy, more sustainable, and more equitable for all of us. And I'm here with two of my fellows today, Abby and Micah.
Great. Abby, you want to introduce yourself next?
Yes. Hi, my name is Abby Griffith. I am originally from Ethiopia, and I live in Vancouver, Washington. I am completely blind. I graduated from Washington State University last year, and with my bachelor's degree in human development. And currently, I am Disability Mobility Initiative Fellow at Disability Rights Washington. My job is reaching out to non-drivers and interviewing and having them share their story and writing short story and things like that. Yes.
Great, thank you. Well, I'll definitely ask a bit more about that later. But Micah, please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, hi, my name is Micah, he, him pronouns. I identify as Mexican and white or Chicano. I am also a fellow with the Disability Mobility Initiative. I also am a member of the PSRC Equity Cabinet, and I'm also the budget and objectives lead for the Inclusive Mobility Work Group with the Seattle Department of Transportation. I am also a Transportation Equity Work Group member with the Seattle Department of Transportation, and I am a program manager for youth services with the Department of Services for the Blind here in Seattle.
Wow, you sound busy.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And they all kind of intersect. It's a lot of like disability advocacy or teaching. My bachelor's degree is in English with my ELA endorsements to get my master's in teaching. But thanks to Anna, I got hyped on this disability advocacy route. So here we are. Love it.
Great. Let's talk about some of your work. So the Disability Mobility Initiative. What I guess what are you trying to achieve, and what would success look like for you? Don't know who wants to jump in first. Maybe Anna.
Sure. Yeah. So we're only about a year and a half old, and it's a program that I had the opportunity to launch at Disability Rights Washington. We do a lot of advocacy work with the disability community, and we hear again and again from people from throughout our state who are disabled that transportation access is a major barrier to living the lives that we want to live in our communities. And, the reality is that much of the United States, and Washington State is part of that, is a very auto-dependent environment where, unless you can drive, it's really, challenging to get from point A to point B, from your home to the grocery store or to school or to a job or to see your friends. And so, I'm someone who grew up here. I'm also low vision and I can't drive. And so this is something that I struggled with a lot. And I actually left Washington State and lived in New York City for many years, where, a majority of people don't drive on a daily basis. And that was really exhilarating to be living in a place where my disability didn't impact me as much, because I could get to where I needed to go, because everything was set up in a way that worked much better for people who couldn't drive. And so coming back to Washington State, coming back to my home state, I really wanted to connect with other people who were in the same situation, because I knew there were a lot of people out there who can't drive. It's not just people like Abby and Micah and I who are low vision and blind. There's a lot of other folks with different kinds of disabilities, like, some folks with mental health disabilities can't drive reliably, epilepsy, folks with mobility disabilities, some people with autism. And then there's young folks who aren't old enough to drive yet. A lot of folks can't afford a vehicle, folks who are aging out of driving. I think, in the United States, the word is that, on average, folks spend the last 10 years of their life not being able to drive. And we've just written off so many people who can't drive and say, okay, you don't actually need to go anywhere. Or if you do, you have to ask, you have to beg for a ride. And that's not great, And so what we're trying to do is bring together all of these different constituencies of people who don't have access or reliable access to a vehicle, and start to say, hey, we can design better communities, and we can build better communities, and we can create better communities together. But you have to listen to us, because we are the experts in this, and we can really help us get to a place where, where we can have a community that's more inclusive and more sustainable. And that's what we're going to do.
Beautiful. Yeah. So what does that mean for Abby and Micah? What do you do sort of on a day-to-day basis? What sort of projects are you involved in?
Yeah, at Disability Rights Washington, I do, as I mentioned before, I reach out to people and ask them share their transportation experience and story and how they get around. And I put that into story, and we build story map for research paper.
Okay, so you're kind of gathering data, gathering these stories to try and figure out how people get around and what they need.
Yes.
And maybe this is Anna, maybe Micah and Abby can talk a little bit more of this, but I think, Abby and Micah were both people who I interviewed last year as part of the story map gathering process. And it's not really just about getting people to share their stories. It's also about, bringing them into this organizing. And I think for both of you, it's been, you can talk a little bit more about this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what it's been like to understand that you could actually have a voice in processes more than you did before.
Yeah. I'll hop in there real quick. I'm excited on that. Yeah, it's So I told Anna before I graduated from the University of Washington in Seattle, I was like, Anna, I want to take time off from going straight to grad school because I specifically want to work for you. And then she was like, yeah, sounds great. And then in the springtime, it was like, Micah, I don't know if I'm actually going to have funding to hire you. So I'm going to connect you with all these other organizations, which is how I'm like so connected. And then she ended up getting funding. And so, boom, that's how we ended up here. And I think that's part of the passion, though, is that I saw Anna being able to make difference and being able to lift up our voices, not just to be heard, but to actually be tactically used, and not in a tokenizing sense, but in a way to actually advocate for our needs. Because um, I grew up in SeaTac, Washington, which is in South King County, South Seattle, and none of my friends had cars. Like when I went to high school, it wasn't 16 and you go get a car. It was 16 and you go get a job at Taco Bell down the street or Jack in the Box or the gas station, because that's the background where we came from, being in a 90% low income community on top of being one of the most diverse high schools in Washington state. Maybe had like one white kid in the class, like I looked like I was the white kid, one of, basically in that community. And it's, something that got me passionate, especially going to UW and starting to work with high school students with visual impairments, because I realized this university that sucked at accommodating me, that would get me textbooks 5 weeks late into the quarter when I'm an English major. So I'm reliant on books. So I do a 10-week quarter in 5 weeks, basically.
God, yeah.
And I didn't I sucked it up because I just kind of accepted it as this is just life. This is what you got to do. And then when I saw my students being trained and living on campus for 6 weeks in a summer program and seeing the struggles they went to being on my campus that I was a student at, that's what sparked fire for me, of realizing, no, we need to speak up. I need to speak up. I need to do my part. And like, I made braille labels for my students on the University of Washington campus, and people took them off. And it was like, what the heck? So that's what got me fired up to say, like, yo, Anna, when I started working with her on just some contracts, that's where I was like, Anna, I want to work for you because I want to get into this line of work of getting stuff done. Because I mean, Anna does that. She gets stuff done. So
Yeah. For me, this is Abby. And um, last year, when I was doing my last senior classes, and I met Anna from where she was attending group called Disability Access, and she was announcing about Disability Mobility Initiative. And I wanted to be interviewed, and she interviewed me to be part of Story Map. And I was so excited, and I stayed in touch with her, and she asked me again go with them to do recording and the conference and things. And I was so happy to get involved to do advocacy work, what she's doing. And I figured it's so important to make things accessible for people like me. And I realized that transportation is vital for people with disability. And I was hoping to get in to disability rights and get involved and do work. And Anna asked me if I want to do internship with her, and I was so excited. And I joined with Disability Mobility Initiative. And since then, I am enjoying all the advocacy work I am doing with Anna. And also, because of that, I got involved with different advocacy organizations too. And it was very helpful for me too to be in this kind of advocacy group because it opened my eyes to be voice and share my experience and um, get a story out and people who don't know about challenges of transportation.
Yeah, I mean, I hope this podcast can also help to get that story out, because I mean, I think it's so. I'm trained as a planner and an urban designer, and it's amazing how little we're taught in university about how people with disabilities and with restricted mobility, what your needs are. And it's it's really bad because we're the people who are meant to be designing cities for everyone, but we're missing out on a big chunk of the population when we assume everyone can drive a car or can descend stairs to get into a metro or that kind of thing. So I'm really interested to hear from you. What's your experience of moving around your city, and or your cities or wherever you've lived? And I guess what would you like to tell the planners, the designers, the architects listening that we should do better?
This is exciting because I mean, what do I want to tell planners? It's just look at the world, look at the data. You're talking about urban planning. Public health is becoming really crucial now as well. When we look at the data, like you just Google search, like right now, Google search number of people in the world who own cars. You're gonna see only 15% of the world actually owns a car. 85% of the world does not depend on a personal vehicle. And I've been down to Mexico to see my family, and it's super easy to get around, even though they're in this little beach town, because there's always taxis going around. And what people do is they just go outside, hey, like flag down the taxi, and they come get you, and it's $1. It's $1 to just go anywhere in the city. So it's not like Uber where it's based, or another taxi where it's based on distance, miles, all that. It's just $1 to go where you need to go. Mind you, that it's a different kind of economy, right? $1 in the US is different than $1 in Mexico. But I think that's like really huge. Transportation needs affected me going to Texas with my mom and my family because I grew up in South King County in the suburb in SeaTac, and transportation was okay, right? But I just thought it was normal it would take me an hour to get somewhere by bus and walking, whereas it took someone else 10 minutes. I thought it was normal to have to wear 3 jackets and boots when other people could just drive and wear whatever, because I had to consider the snow, the rain, my cane getting stuck in all those things. And just to get to college, packing my backpack, my computer, my lunch, my dinner, my snacks, right? All that in my backpack. So my bag would weigh like 30 pounds or so. People would be like, oh my gosh, isn't that bad for you? And I didn't realize until I was like 20, 21, I had to start getting massages because my back was just always so messed up. So I ended up having to invest in, what do you call that? One of those like North Face backpacks that like clips around your waist and stuff. Cause it just was messing me up because of all the weight that I had to carry. So I think that's a big thing that I want people to understand about what it's like for us, as well as it determines where we live. When I made the decision to go to the University of Washington and transfer from community college, I had to decide, all right, do I stay out of the city where it's cheaper, maybe by $200 to rent a room out here and commute 2 hours one way, so like 4 hours round trip to get to school and back? Or do I go live in the city where I'm going to probably have to pay $200 more a month in rent, where I was paying $750 a month just to share a room, not even my own room, just to share a room. But I have the accessibility. I have frequent buses. That's what was so cool about living in the city of Seattle, was all the numerous buses. I never had to check bus schedules because they came every 5 to 10 minutes. I lived a 5-minute walk from the gym, 5-minute walk from the grocery store, 20-minute walk from campus. I was just like, wow, this is the life. But I paid for it. I was paycheck to paycheck because I was working part-time to support myself through school. And then, yeah, I made that decision too because my family moved to Texas. And when I was 18, I wanted to move to Texas with them so bad. And when I went and lived where my mom was in Fort Worth, which is right outside of Dallas, I was just like, there's nothing out here. Like, you need a car. I made it made it fun to run to the gym because I'd run to the gym because it was a mile away, work out, run a mile back, so that way I get my 2 miles of cardio and lift weights in the gym. But that's what the struggle was. And on that run, there was not always sidewalks. There was times where I'm high kneeing because there's high grass and stuff. Because if I don't run in the grass, I'm in the road. And I don't know if I know you're from the UK and stuff, but like Texan drivers, they're no joke. Like, I've almost been run over more in the few times I've been in Texas than all the times I've jaywalked in Seattle. It's confession time, right? I jaywalk hella in Seattle. Like, it's not even funny how often I jaywalk. But yeah, like, that's the thing, that we have to make decisions around what we can have access to, because that transportation also influences our access to jobs. And that becomes really crucial, where to live in a place that's accessible, you lose affordability. So it's this awkward in between. Yeah. Whew, got excited there.
Abby, do you want to share a bit about, where you grew up and where you had to move and what that means as far as seeing your family?
Yes, my experience about transportation and getting around is it takes way too long to get to places. Like, let's say if I want to go to grocery shopping, if I'm lucky, if it's nice weather, I can get to the bus, and if I don't miss it, I can get to grocery shopping on time. And when I have to transport to some buses, it's kind of harder with, especially when I'm coming back from shopping. It takes me a lot because I have to carry all my groceries and everything like that, and they transfer in different buses. Besides that, too, when I was a student at WSU, um, it took me 3 hours to get to school
Whoa.
one way 3 hours, and three buses, in total of almost 6 hours day traveling, top of
Whoa.
my schoolwork and my classes and my life and all that. Also, I grew up in a small town called Richfield, and we did not have any transportation system around. And my mother adopted 7 children from 3 different places, and we were I was the oldest in the house, so none of children drive, and my mother is single mom, and she has only one car, and she is full-time teacher and small farm owner, and she has all kind of things going on. So I can't ask my mom give me a ride everywhere. So what happened was, I just got stuck in the house. I didn't do anything with my friends like young person. I didn't go to like shopping or get out and enjoy different areas. Only thing I have can do is like just stay home and depressed, because when you don't have transportation system that you can get around, you just stay home. And only thing I did was go to school and come home, uh, and stay home. And whenever my mom has time, she give me drive, but that's only like here and there, not a lot. So people who cannot drive, not even only blind people or disabled people, but like younger people who can't drive yacht or who cannot afford experience same thing what I experienced. And it was so hard to get out and do everyday thing when you don't have accessible transportation system. um, I think uh, urban planners, I would say that I think when they are planning for things, I wonder it's possible for them to have more people with disability get involved, because
Mm,
a lot of times people who don't have disability plan things is not accessible for people who are using wheelchair or cane or things like that. It's not accessible for us, but they can't catch that problem.
mm.
um, I think, in my opinion at least, like getting more people with disability involved in planning um, um, decision.
Yeah, it's essential.
Exactly. This is Anna, and I would just want to say, I mean, that is sort of, the goal of what we're doing with disability mobility is first, having these stories be out there and having, them recognize like these are people's experiences, right? And then having people like Abby and Micah start to get involved, start to show up at meetings, where all these planning meetings happen, get involved in some of the commissions and places where they can start to have a disabled voice, a non-driving voice in the room. But it's going to take more than that. It's going to take these agencies having staff that have this lived experience, and
Mm.
there's a lot of barriers to that. There's a lot of barriers to education, getting the credentials, and then so many of these agencies here in the United States, and even advocacy organizations that work in the transportation space, have driver's license requirements on jobs. And so,
Oh, yeah.
people like all three of us are just excluded from any of these jobs. And, I'm not saying like, of course, if you're a bus driver, you should have a valid driver's license. Like, I should not be a bus driver. That is 100% true. But there's other jobs at the transit agency that I would be, qualified for and would have a lot of, input, because I'm on the bus every day. I understand, what isn't and isn't working as far as connectivity and safety and access in a way that someone who doesn't ride the bus all the time just doesn't know. And so we are pushing for better hiring and better recruitment, and ultimately changing the way people think about what kind of experience or credentials is needed to be good at these jobs. Because I really think that those of us who don't drive and are walking the sidewalks every day know a lot about the system, and what is missing and not working, and what should be addressed in a way that you just don't get if you're in a car and you're zooming by at a fast speed. And so that's something that we're really, really hoping to change through our work.
Amazing. Thank you guys for sharing that. That was really powerful to hear your personal stories. And I think Abby, or Anna, you just said something really important there, which is like you have to hear from the people who are living it. You can't just look at like a bird's eye view and see a plan of the bus network and say, yeah, that's pretty good. You have to talk to the people who take it every day and travel 3 hours, to get to school, to figure out, what needs to improve. But I mean, something that I find so interesting is that Micah, your story about living in the city and that giving you access to so many more things, you've just totally perfectly articulated what I suppose some of the more forward-thinking planners and urbanists have been campaigning for, which is walkable, dense places that are easy to get around without using a car. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the 15-minute city idea.
Yeah, Anna did a thing on that.
There we go. So it's all connecting. So that's a concept that's come out of Paris. That is all about everything you need for day-to-day life should be available to you within a 15-minute walk. And it just strikes me that I guess we've been thinking about all the benefits in terms of health and in terms of reducing emissions, but another huge one is that it's just way more inclusive for people who can't drive, and you don't need a big public transport network either. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's great. Like things should be like that proximity is useful, but I take some issue with the concept in that I think it sort of erases a lot of the difference, especially thinking about disability, like how long it takes someone to go somewhere. And what, is 15 minutes in this sort of like planner mindset of an able-bodied, 20 something year old who isn't walking with a small child or a bag of groceries or whatever is a very different 15 minutes than
Come on now.
what is 15 minutes to someone walking with a cane or dragging along a stroller, or,
Yeah.
and so like we need to be thinking about it consciously. And this idea that if the people in a car, say, oh, they want a 15-minute city, but they still want to be able to hop in their car and go to the Costco, the affordable, the big whatever bulk grocery store when they want to do a big grocery shop. And for those of us who don't have the option of hopping in a car and doing that, what that means is that there are no local grocery stores, because everyone, who can goes and shops somewhere further away when it's convenient, goes to the Trader Joe's, goes to, trying to think of examples that will translate internationally.
Sure.
And so our neighborhoods that used to, in many places, like before there were such, designed around cars, had the services we needed closer. But now the expectation is that you are going to be traveling a lot further. And even if these 15, what I worry about these 15-minute cities is, okay, we'll get a coffee shop and a yoga studio and like a flower shop, but not not the healthcare center, not the childcare, not the affordable grocery store, not the college. Like, there are still things that people who have the privilege to travel far will travel far to, and that will continue to make the scale not work for us.
Yeah, great
drive.
point.
Yeah.
On top of that, Anna, if I can add to it, it's like not just the disability side, but it's the affordability as well. When you talk about the yoga studio and the coffee shop, who is that benefiting? That's the question that I've been realizing now more and more. Because even when I lived in the city, I didn't live the city life like everyone else did, where people would be, oh, let's go hang out and get coffee. I'm like, yo, I'm the college student that's bringing my own tea bags in my backpack, going to the coffee shop, getting the free hot water until they bumped it up to 25 cents a cup, using the honey and sugar that they already got to give myself a little sweet kick. And yeah, using my own tea bags because I couldn't afford $5 coffee a day. I couldn't afford to go out and eat on the restaurant for fun or because I didn't feel like it. And I think that's the big thing too when we're talking about the cities is, what is available and why is that what's available? Because I think that's a really big thing when we're talking about who are we inviting in. And that's been a lot of the discrimination that we've seen here, at least in Seattle, with the zoning laws and stuff, where are we making it welcome for families, for lower income people, like working class people, et cetera, or are we pushing people out? Because that's basically what it's become now, where even if you live on SSI, that's $783 a month. International Social Security income is what we give people who are disabled who don't work. So the maximum you would get is $783 a month in just total, and then $196 in food stamps, which is basically only for food items at grocery stores. And I was just sharing, right? Like I was paying $750 a month in rent to share a room. Not for my own room, to share a room. So it's like, we'll see how we're gonna afford to get a haircut. Maybe I'm blind and I'm gonna have to figure out how to, because that's what I did. Literally, I figured out, okay, I'm feeling, sorry for the visual side, I'm feeling my head, trying to figure, all right, don't trim the long part, don't just trim the sides, trim the back, leave the top good, boom.
I think I am going to add something here in Vancouver where I live. If I go to downtown area, like waterfront and things like that, they make sure there's a grocery shop store, and there's convenience stores, and there's a lot of everything, restaurants and coffee shop and everything. And actually there's a buses too. I mean, even though there's everything's walking distance, they have a lot of buses go there. But places like where my neighborhood were low income areas and rural areas, that's where we are lacking accessible transportation system.
Yeah, no, I mean, in this affordability, I think it's a challenge everywhere, right? In any large and thriving urban center is what happens is the folks who, with the most limited income are getting priced out to areas without sidewalks and without transit service. And we're in the process of doing some demographic surveying of our people who've shared their stories with us. And so far, I think a vast majority of folks earn under 35,000 a year, which that you can't afford a house on that. You can't afford an apartment in Seattle. You can't afford, or anywhere where there's reliable transit on that income. So, it is, the work we're doing isn't about making, city centers that are accessible for the people who have all the privilege in the world. Like, that's not going to get us to where we need to go.
So do you think that probably a better public transport system would be is that kind of the main thing you're hoping for, to better connect those existing areas rather than, well, let's say, densifying them?
I think it's both. I think, we need to, here in the United States, there's been such an underinvestment in transit and in sidewalks. And we're actually, our transportation system in Washington state is largely funded through a gas tax, which is prohibited by our state constitution from being spent on anything but highways. And so, and that started in the 1940s. So almost, 3/4 of a century of underinvestment in any other kind of infrastructure. And so where it does exist, these lovely walkable neighborhoods, everyone wants to live in, right? Those are prime real estate areas. And so we have to start playing catch up and really fund a connected pedestrian network and then fund reliable transit service. And we're saying everywhere, like why can't, and what's reliable transit service in a more rural area is going to look different. It's not going to be every 15 minutes, but at least daily, at least twice a day in some of these more rural communities that have lost, they used to maybe have Greyhound service, and now that doesn't even exist anymore. And so, people are isolated, and the only options are then these like emergency medical transport, or asking friends or family if you have that access, to get rides. But it really, I think it is gonna take big investments. But they're investments that we need to make, because we can't just say, okay, you can only have access if you can afford to live in the densest part of cities.
This is like at the intersection of so many issues, isn't it? It's like mobility, but also like social justice, access to employment, climate change, economics. It seems like this, this whole thing is really could be at the center of solving a lot of problems.
We think it is. Yes. And by listening to, non-drivers like Abby and Micah and myself, like there is, the expertise for us to get to a more sustainable, equitable place. But instead we're voices that have been often left out of the conversation, and not even I think decision makers don't even know that non-drivers exist in the United States to the extent that we do, because we're considered our mobility needs are just not valued. And so we're trying to change that. And one thing we can talk about a little bit is our Week Without Driving challenge, that we invited elected leaders to try to spend a week without driving themselves in a vehicle. And we had about 100 folks participate. And then we partnered them with people from their communities who were part of our network of non-drivers, so they could learn from our expertise about, okay, what do you do when you've got a groceries and kid and it's dark and it's raining and you're waiting for the bus? What are your tactics for staying dry and keeping your kid happy and finding a bathroom? And, and so I think that's something we're going to try to do going forward is to build on, because, it's going to take some time before our voices are sort of incorporated into these planning bodies, but people can do a better job of listening. And that's what, Week Without Driving is about.
That sounds great. I mean, did you have, what were people's feedback after they did the Week Without Driving? Were they shocked by how difficult it was?
I think so. There was people who, the people who agreed to participate were already folks who were, allies in many ways. And
Sure.
were like, people who have a bike and ride it sometimes and ride buses, but they still all drive when it got hard. Like they all drive to the grocery store. Or they drive when they take their kid to dance class at night, in the evenings after school when it's dark and raining. And to
Mm,
not have that sort of option to bail out to a car, or to think about it a little bit before they did, I think was shocking to some of them, that those like quote unquote marginal trips, like those were the ones that were really hard to do.
yeah.
So I think that changed the conversation for them.
I saw a tweet the other day that said, "Stop using your car as a 2-ton umbrella," which I thought was hilarious.
Come on now. Come on. That's good stuff.
A couple of years ago, I was working for a city council in the Midlands here in England, and we were doing engagement with a bunch of stakeholders on a plan they were doing for the city. So we got talking to the city's equality officer, who herself was a wheelchair user, and it was really interesting because she was saying the pavements are so bad around her house she can't get from her front door to the bus stop because there's gaps in the sidewalk, so she just can't do it. It's just impossible. And so she was quite worried that if we were limiting cars from entering the city, that would make for people like her who need cars to get around, that then people with other disabilities wouldn't then be able to access. So there's this really fine balance, isn't there? Different people need different things, I guess, and we don't know
Yeah,
until we ask them.
for sure. And there are folks with mobility disabilities for whom being in a vehicle is going to be easier than our current system. But,
Right.
There's also there's so much potential for people with mobility disabilities to use active transportation and use cars are huge, right? And the trying to then you have to, and expensive. And so for many folks that we work with who, sure, in the ideal world, they'd have a wheelchair accessible van and they drive places, like they don't have that. They can't afford that. And so, can we create wide sidewalks that are smooth and active transportation lanes that, people in mobility devices can use, electric mobility devices that, don't require then that having, that huge expensive vehicle that, on the incomes that most of the people we work with have, just, if they can do it, it's a huge stretch.
Mm.
Yeah, I have a friend who is wheelchair user, and when we are trying to go to somewhere like coffee shop or restaurant, first thing we do is which restaurant's gonna be accessible for a wheelchair
Mm.
user,
Yeah.
and it's such a stressful that everybody can't access to things.
If I can just add really quick too on that, like what you were mentioning there, Ross,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about hearing us, it's about having people with these experiences in places of power. Like
Yeah.
when you have a foster care system run by people who have never been in foster care, it's a totally different perspective that you have than, I'm using that because I was in foster care, right? When you talk about homelessness, I was homeless twice, and that's a whole extra layer of being blind and homeless. And it's stuff where it's like, we don't understand it's stuff to understand that the system is set up in a way to where we are kept out. Like these are intentional decisions that are made because we have not been given the access to get up to those places. I was telling Anna about this in another conversation we were having. I was like, I'm looking at getting my PhD, not because I have this amazing drive for a PhD, but because it's almost like being a blind person, you have to be overqualified in order to even get in a
Wow.
position, right? I've applied for multiple full-time jobs, and even one in particular, me and Anna cracked up about this because they specifically wanted a person with a disability, person of color, blah, blah, blah. check. I checked all of the boxes. And then they get the whitest able-bodied man like in there. I wrote a cover letter and everything. He didn't even submit a cover letter because I heard this on like, I showed up to a meeting early that he was there at. And it was just like, you're kidding me. Like, and then it was just like, I get it. Because people in ownership want people who look like them. And that's why, like, I want to be mindful of, time, but that's why it's so important for us to, not just from an entitlement perspective. No, it's not like we're saying force us in, make people lose jobs. Like, no, that's not the heart. The heart is to care for people. Mia Mingus coined this phrase that access is love. And it's coming from that place. So let's love each other by not just hearing these voices, but doing something about it. And not just doing something about it, but giving these people actual full-time jobs with benefits, and not just work in situations like me where I'm working 5 different contracts that pay me really good money, right? It's like that tokenization, but it's also like, dang, it'd be nice to actually have a full-time job and not worry about my job security.
Yeah, actually, I went to school for the blind here in Vancouver, and I graduated from there, and I got my bachelor's degree. I also got my associate's degree too. But last year, I was applying for job there, and they didn't select me. Instead, they hired somebody who can see. Even they are school for the blind, UC school for the blind, but not hiring people with disability. It's just sad to think about how people think when it comes to hiring people with disability.
Yeah, there needs to be a mindset shift, doesn't there? That just says, you we trust you to do the job because you're qualified to do it, And I know you guys have your, the software that supports you, like screen readers and that kind of thing. So it does seem to me like we don't really have many excuses unless you're applying to be a bus driver, as Anna said.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't even apply for a job that I can't do. Like, what kind of people apply for a job that they don't trust themselves to do job? It's just people who don't think I deserve that job. But definitely I am some jobs actually I am overqualified. I know I can do it, and they don't think I can.
Yeah. I know we've sort of reached the end of our hour. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me and sharing your stories. Is there any sort of last points you want to make before I sort of wrap up?
No, thank you so much for having us. And I think this is a very wide-ranging conversation. So I appreciate you creating the space for this. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. This is
my pleasure,
honor.
guys. And where can people find out more about the work that you're doing?
Sure. So Disability Mobility Initiative, you can check us out at disabilityrightswashington.org is our website, and we're on Twitter and TikTok. You just look up Disability Mobility Initiative, or Dismobility is our handle.